Aria, you promised to wait for me.
Do you know him?
The church doors should never have opened again. They had already closed once, sealing the moment Aria believed her life had chosen its path. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, painting the marble floor in fractured colors: gold, crimson, blue, like blessings scattered carelessly at her feet. The organ's final note still trembled in the air, thin and fragile, as if afraid to linger. Aria's fingers were still warm from the ring. It sat heavy on her hand, unfamiliar, pressing against skin that had known other promises, softer ones, spoken beneath open skies rather than vaulted ceilings. She inhaled, preparing to exhale relief. Then the silence cracked. At first, it was only a shift of a ripple through the pews, a hush that felt wrong, unfinished. Whispers followed, low and confused, weaving through the congregation like an uneasy wind. Someone turned. Then another. The sound came next. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, unmistakable. They echoed down the aisle, each step landing with the weight of intention. Not hurried, not uncertain. Whoever walked toward the altar knew exactly where he was going. Aria's heart faltered. She turned before she meant to, before her mind could protest or her body could refuse. It was instinct, ancient and unkind. Xi-Chen stood at the entrance. For a heartbeat, she forgot how to breathe. He looked like a ghost that had learned how to live again, solid, real, impossibly present. Not the boy who once skipped stones across the river or laughed too loudly under flickering lantern light. This man was sharpened by time. His dark eyes held restraint, not warmth. His posture was steady, controlled, as though the years had taught him never to arrive unprepared. He wore no smile. He wore no anger. Only certainty. The murmurs grew louder now, but Aria heard none of them. The world had narrowed to the distance between her and Xi-Chen, a distance that felt both endless and terrifyingly small. Memory struck without warning. A promise whispered by a river. A hand held too tightly. A future spoken too soon. Her chest tightened as the past she had buried clawed its way upward, refusing to remain silent. Xi-Chen walked forward, stopping just short of the altar. He did not look at anyone else. Not the groom. Not the priest. Not the stunned congregation. Only Aria. For a moment, she wondered if he would shout, demand, break the fragile order of the room. He did none of it. His voice, when it came, was calm, too calm. Low and steady, carrying across the church like a blade sliding free. You were supposed to wait. The words were not an accusation. They were the truth. Aria's knees weakened. The ring on her finger felt suddenly unbearable, as though it had grown heavier in an instant. Every choice she had made, every year she had spent convincing herself that waiting was impossible, collapsed into that single sentence. The promise she thought time had erased stood before her, breathing, watching. And just like that, Aria's world did not shatter. It split. Long before weddings and vows, before silk dresses and solemn hymns, there was a small riverside town where time moved slowly and dreams felt safe. The river curved through the town like a secret, carrying stories no one thought to question. Children grew up barefoot and unafraid, believing the world was no larger than the horizon they could see from the water's edge. Xi-Chen belonged to the quiet spaces. Even as a boy, he observed more than he spoke, listening with the kind of patience that made adults forget he was there. He learned early that words, once released, could not be taken back. So he chose them carefully or not at all. Aria was his opposite. She ran as if the wind belonged to her, laughter trailing behind like a ribbon. She spoke with her hands, her eyes bright with curiosity, her presence filling every empty corner. Where Xi-Chen was stillness, Aria was movement. Where he paused, she leapt. They fit without trying. Their days were stitched together with small ritual stones skipped across the river. Secrets whispered beneath the old fig tree. Shared silences that needed no explanation. When storms came, they counted thunder together. When the lanterns were lit at dusk, they watched the town glow as if it were holding its breath. Neither spoke of the future out loud. It existed anyway, fragile and unquestioned. On the evening the promise was made, the lantern festival burned low. The air smelled of smoke and river water, and the sky held the deep blue of something ending. They sat near the bank, their reflections trembling in the water, distorted but inseparable. Aria spoke first, her voice light, careless, unaware of its weight. "When we're grown," she said, swinging her legs, "I won't marry anyone else." The words fell easily, like skipping a stone. Xi-Chen turned to her. The lantern light caught his face, softening the seriousness he already carried. He didn't smile. He didn't tease her for speaking too boldly. He only nodded. In that moment, he believed her not because children were foolish, but because promises to him were sacred. He stored her words away like something precious, something meant to be kept safe until the time came to claim it. Aria, however, had already moved on, watching the lanterns drift downstream, unaware that her future had just been spoken aloud. They did not know how quickly childhood burns, how quietly it turns to ash. The town would change. The river would witness goodbyes. Life would arrive without asking permission, demanding more than innocence could afford. But that night, beneath a dying lantern and a sky that did not warn them, two children believed the world would remember their promise. Only one of them would. Xi-Chen left without ceremony. There were no speeches, no drawn-out farewells meant to soften the break. Departure came quietly, like a door closing in the night. By the time the town noticed his absence, he was already gone carrying nothing but a small bag and the weight of unspoken obligation. The world beyond the river was vast and indifferent. It did not care about promises made beneath lantern light or the careful dreams of a quiet boy. It asked for proof, not hope. Strength, not sentiment. Xi-Chen learned this quickly. Work found him before comfort ever did. Long days blurred into longer nights, each one demanding more than he had planned to give. He slept where he could, ate when it was possible, and spoke only when necessary. Trust, he discovered, was expensive and often misplaced. Loss came first. It arrived in the form of news delivered too late, by voices that spoke gently as if softness could lessen its cruelty. Grief followed him like a shadow he could never outrun, settling into his bones, teaching him how fragile certainty truly was. Then came betrayal. Promises so carefully guarded were broken by those who had sworn loyalty without meaning it. Xi-Chen learned to read people the way one reads weather, cautiously, with an eye for warning signs. Silence became armor. Distance became survival. Still, he endured. Every small victory was earned through sacrifice. Every step forward demanded something be left behind: comfort, youth, softness. He rose not because the world favored him, but because he refused to fall. Through it all, the promise remained. It did not comfort him. It haunted him. In moments of exhaustion, when doubt threatened to undo him, Xi-Chen remembered a girl by the river, her voice bright with certainty she did not yet understand. The memory hurt, but it steadied him. It reminded him why he continued when quitting would have been easier. He did not return sooner because he could not. Pride had nothing to do with it. Survival did. When he finally came back, it was not as the boy who left. It was as a man who had earned the right to stand where he once belonged. He returned because he finally could. And because some promises, no matter how much time tries to erase them, refuse to be forgotten. The wedding did not end with applause. It ended with doors closing too softly, with faces turned away in practiced politeness, with a silence that followed Aria home and refused to leave. By morning, the town had already decided how the story would be told, half-truths dressed as certainty, whispers sharpened into judgment. Aria became a prisoner without walls. Every visit to the market carried the weight of eyes that lingered too long. Every greeting was measured, careful, as though she were something fragile that might break again without warning. Some pitied her. Others blamed her. Few bothered to understand. The man she was meant to marry left with dignity intact. He did not raise his voice. He did not demand explanations she could not give. His restraint hurt more than anger would have. When he walked away, he carried heartbreak quietly, leaving her to hold the pieces of what should have been. At home, silence reigned. Her family avoided the subject with a precision that felt rehearsed. Meals were eaten with forced normalcy. Questions went unasked. It was easier, they seemed to believe, to pretend nothing had happened than to acknowledge the truth settling uncomfortably between them. But night offered no such mercy. Sleep came in fragments, broken and restless. When Aria closed her eyes, she was no longer in her room. She was by the river again, feet dangling above dark water, lanterns flickering against the sky. She heard laughter she hadn't recognized as her own in years. She saw Xi-Chen, not the man who stood in the church, but the boy who watched her with quiet certainty. She woke each time with her heart racing, the weight of the past pressing against her chest. Days passed. Xi-Chen never contacted her. No message. No explanation. No demand for answers. That absence was louder than his interruption ever could have been. It echoed through her thoughts, forcing her to confront what she had buried beneath practicality and expectation. For the first time in years, Aria asked herself a question she had long avoided. Had she chosen safety because it was love or because it was easier? The ring no longer rested on her finger, yet its imprint remained. Xi-Chen did not ask for explanations. He had learned long ago that answers demanded too early were rarely honest. Some truths needed time to surface on their own, unforced and undeniable. So he remained silent not as punishment, but as choice. Instead of reaching for Aria, he reached for the ground beneath his feet. He began quietly, almost invisibly. A piece of land no one had cared to claim in years was bought back without announcement. Then another. Slowly, the town noticed a familiar name appearing on documents. A long-closed storefront opening its doors once more. His father's business returned first. The sign was repainted, the windows cleared, the foundations strengthened. Xi-Chen worked alongside hired hands without ceremony. Sleeves rolled, movements efficient. He spoke little, but when he did, people listened. There was steadiness in him, now a sense that he could not be shaken by rumor or judgment. He did not rebuild for spectacle. He rebuilt because roots mattered. From a distance, he watched Aria move through the town like someone learning how to breathe again. He never approached her path, never crossed into her line of sight intentionally. Restraint governed him more fiercely than desire ever had. He would not steal her. Love taken under pressure was not love at all. It was surrender, and Xi-Chen had not survived the years away to become a man who demanded what was not freely given. If Aria came back, it would be because she chose him. Not the promise, not the past, not guilt or longing. Choice was sacred, and that, more than anything else, unsettled her. From her window, Aria saw the changes he made without her. The town spoke his name again, not with pity or speculation, but respect. He had returned not to claim her, but to claim himself. Frightened her, not because he waited but because he could. The promise had once been a simple thing, spoken without consequence. Now, the silence he wrapped around it forced her to confront something far more dangerous than obligation. Freedom. When Aria finally confronted him, it wasn't with tears, it was with anger. It surprised her how steady her hands were as she stood before him, how controlled her voice sounded despite the storm gathering beneath it. They met not by accident, but by choice, in the quiet space between obligations where neither of them could pretend the other did not exist. "You disappeared," she said. The words were sharp, unpolished, long overdue. Xi-Chen did not flinch. He studied her for a moment, as though committing the truth of her to memory, not the girl he remembered, but the woman standing before him now. "And you moved on," he replied. There was no accusation in his voice, only acknowledgement. The air between them tightened. Years of restraint pressed forward, demanding release. Aria felt anger rise, not the loud, reckless kind, but the controlled fury of someone who had carried silence for too long. "I waited," she said. "Longer than you think. Long enough to believe you weren't coming back." Xi-Chen's gaze did not waver. "I never stopped intending to. That doesn't change what it cost me." Her words landed heavily. She spoke of nights spent convincing herself that hope was foolish, of how waiting became something people expected her to grow out of. She spoke of choosing stability because longing had exhausted her. Xi-Chen listened. When he spoke, it was not to defend himself, but to reveal the truth he had never shared. He told her why he left, not in dramatic confession, but in measured honesty. Of responsibility thrust upon him too early. Of choices made without alternatives. Of how returning without becoming someone worthy felt like breaking the promise rather than honoring it. "I didn't leave because I stopped caring," he said quietly. "I left because staying would have destroyed us both." Silence followed, not empty, but full. For the first time, Aria saw the years etched into him. The discipline, the restraint, the cost of becoming a man who could stand before her without asking for anything. "I thought you forgot," she said, softer now. Xi-Chen shook his head once. "I remembered every day." The truth of it hurt more than anger ever had. They stood there, no longer opponents, no longer children bound by a single sentence spoken too soon. The promise, once a chain that bound them to the past, shifted into something else entirely. A question. Not who owed whom, but what did they want now? Neither begged. Neither asked for forgiveness. Because some wounds were not meant to be erased, only understood. And as they parted, Aria realized something had changed. The promise no longer owned her. For the first time, she was free to choose. Aria stood between two lives, not two men. The distinction mattered more than she had expected. For weeks, she had tried to reduce her turmoil into something simpler, something easier to explain. But the truth refused to be narrowed into faces or names. This was not about choosing one person over another. It was about choosing the version of herself she was willing to become. One life was predictable. It followed a path already approved by family, neighbors, and tradition. Promised routine, safety, and the comfort of expectations met. There was value in that kind of life. Peace even. Aria understood now that choosing it had not been a mistake, it had been survival. The other life offered no such assurances. It was uncertain, demanding, and stripped of illusions. It required honesty not only with others, but with herself. It asked her to stand in the open, without guarantees, without borrowed certainty. She learned that love was not proven by sacrifice alone. Waiting, enduring, surrendering, those were not the only measures of devotion. Growth mattered. Choice mattered. Becoming someone whole rather than someone preserved. Xi-Chen had grown. The boy who once clung to her promise no longer existed. In his place stood a man shaped by responsibility and restraint, by losses carried quietly and victories earned without applause. He did not need her to complete him. He did not ask her to stay. He offered her freedom, that terrified her more than any vow ever had. Because freedom meant there would be no one else to blame if she chose wrongly. No promise to hide behind. No obligation to soften the consequences. Only desire, clarity, and courage. Aria examined her heart with an honesty she had avoided for years. She realized that the love she once imagined was no longer the love she needed. What she sought now was not rescue or reassurance, but partnership, one built on truth rather than expectation. And for the first time, the future did not feel like a decision forced upon her. Felt like an invitation. Aria did not announce her choice. There was no moment meant for witnesses, no declaration shaped for approval. The decision settled into her slowly, the way truth often does, without drama, without resistance, until it felt inevitable. She began by letting go, not of people, but of the weight she had carried for so long. The guilt of disappointing others, the fear of being misunderstood, the belief that love had to be proven through endurance alone. In that letting go, something gentler emerged. Clarity. She sought Xi-Chen not with urgency, but with intention. When she found him, it was where he often was now, surrounded by work that grounded him. A life he had built patiently, without demand. He looked up as she approached, surprise flickering briefly across his features before settling into calm attentiveness. "I've made a decision," she said. Xi-Chen did not interrupt. He did not lean forward or reach for her. He remained still, allowing her the space to speak freely. "I'm not choosing you because of the promise," Aria continued. And I'm not choosing you because of what we were. Her voice did not waver. I'm choosing you because of who we are now. The silence that followed was not heavy. It was full. Xi-Chen exhaled slowly, as if releasing something he had carried longer than he realized. When he finally spoke, his words were measured, sincere. Then stay, he said. Not because you owe me. Only if you want to. That was all. No grand speeches. No conditions. And in that simplicity, Aria felt the truth of her choice solidify. She stepped closer not as a girl bound by a promise, but as a woman stepping into partnership. For the first time, love felt expansive rather than confining. Letting go had not diminished it. It had made it real. Aria did not arrive at her choice suddenly. It did not strike like lightning or announce itself with certainty. Instead, it unfolded in the quiet moments, the pauses between breaths, the stillness after unanswered questions. It took shape not in urgency, but in reflection. She realized she had been holding on for too long, not to Xi-Chen alone, but to fear of regret, fear of judgment, fear of choosing incorrectly and carrying the weight of that mistake forever. She had confused caution with wisdom, endurance with devotion. Letting go of those beliefs felt dangerous at first, like stepping onto unfamiliar ground without knowing if it would hold. But it did. In the absence of pressure, clarity emerged. Aria saw now that love was not meant to be a debt repaid over time. It was not meant to be sustained by obligation or silence. Love, she understood, was a shared direction, a willingness to grow alongside another, not remain frozen in what once was. When she finally went to Xi-Chen, it was with steady resolve. He was exactly where she expected to find him, surrounded by the evidence of a life rebuilt through patience and discipline. There was nothing hurried about him, nothing performative. This, she realized, was the man he had become not because he sought her approval, but because he had claimed his own. He noticed her approach and rose, attentive but restrained. Aria met his gaze without hesitation. "I've been thinking," she began. "Not about the promise but about myself." Xi-Chen waited. He always had. "I thought letting go meant losing something important," she said. "But I was wrong. Letting go is how I found what matters." She told him what she had learned in the silence, how choosing safety had once been necessary, how waiting had shaped her but also limited her. She spoke of the woman she had become, and the woman she still wished to be. "I don't want to live inside a promise anymore," Aria said softly. "I want to live inside a choice." The words settled between them. Xi-Chen's expression shifted not to triumph, not to relief, but to something quieter and deeper. Respect. "I never wanted the promise," he admitted. "I wanted you to want me." That truth so simple, so unguarded made her chest tighten. "I do," she said. "Now. Fully." He did not reach for her immediately. He did not rush the moment or claim it as victory. Instead, he offered her what he had always believed love should allow. Freedom. "If you stay," he said, "stay because it feels right tomorrow, and the day after that. Not because today feels heavy." Aria stepped forward, closing the space between them. The choice did not feel heavy at all. Felt light. For the first time, love was not something she was proving or defending. It was something she was stepping into open-eyed, unafraid. Letting go had not been an ending. It had been the beginning. The lanterns returned in a season when the air felt gentler. They drifted across the river at dusk, small and glowing, their reflections trembling on the water like memories that had learned how to rest. The town had changed, new buildings, unfamiliar faces, but the river remained faithful to itself, carrying light the way it always had. Aria stood at the bank, watching. Time had softened her, not weakened her. She no longer searched the water for answers or signs. Some questions, she had learned, did not need to be solved to be understood.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please like, share and subscribe to my channel. Also click on the notification bell, so that you will get notified whenever a new story comes up. You can also go ahead to tell me the country you are watching from, so that I can make a story for you.